Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when a simple question becomes a doorway to revelation, when an ordinary encounter carries the weight of destiny. Imagine a weary mother, clutching hope the way one clutches breath, standing before a mansion's golden gates with nothing left to offer but a trembling request. "Do you have an expired cake for my daughter?" She thought she was asking for leftovers. She had no idea the millionaire behind those walls heard every word, and heaven had already begun to move. This story is not just about need. It is about the God who sees need before we speak it. It is about the quiet prayers whispered in the dark that rise louder than fear. It is about how divine provision often begins with a humble step, one that feels too small, too late, or too unworthy, and yet becomes the spark of a miracle. Tonight, as we lean into this moment together, I want us to imagine the unseen choreography of grace unfolding behind the scenes of our own lives. How many times have we walked up to doors expecting crumbs, unaware that God had already prepared a banquet? How often have we braced for rejection while heaven prepared restoration? What you're about to hear is not merely a story, it is an invitation. An invitation to believe again, to hope again, to recognize that even when our hands are empty, God is never out of resources, never out of compassion, never out of ways to turn the smallest plea into the most unexpected blessing. Humble requests can unlock unexpected divine provision is a truth woven quietly through countless lives. Yet its power is often overlooked because humility rarely makes noise. It does not stride into a room announcing its intentions, nor does it demand to be heard. Humility whispers. It approaches with caution, with trembling honesty, with the vulnerable acknowledgement that one cannot meet a need alone. And yet, precisely because humility is unguarded, it becomes the clearest doorway through which blessings can enter. When someone comes with a humble request, they are not merely seeking help, they are revealing trust that someone will listen, that someone will care, that someone might respond with compassion instead of judgment. In a world where pride builds walls and self-sufficiency closes doors, humility opens space for miracles to breathe. A humble request does not always look noble or poetic. Sometimes it looks like a mother asking for an expired cake, because she believes even something discarded is better than her child going without. Sometimes it looks like a person who has run out of strength asking for prayers, because their own faith feels too thin to hold everything together. Sometimes it looks like admitting a mistake, acknowledging a weakness, or confessing that life has become heavier than expected. These moments of honesty may feel uncomfortable, even embarrassing, but they carry spiritual weight because they position the heart in a place where divine intervention can be recognized. When someone is full of pride, blessings often come and go unnoticed, dismissed as coincidence or personal accomplishment. But when someone is humble, their eyes remain open to the ways God moves, even through the ordinary, even through the unexpected, even through the hands of people they never imagined would help. Humble requests attract divine provision because they create alignment between human need and God's willingness to provide. Scripture and lived experience both reveal a God who is drawn to sincerity, who is moved by the cries of the brokenhearted, who responds when someone admits they cannot do it alone. Humility becomes a vessel, shaping the soul into a posture that is ready to receive. It strips away the illusions of control and self-made success, replacing them with an honest recognition that every good thing ultimately flows from grace. When someone approaches life with this understanding, doors begin to open in ways that defy explanation. Opportunities appear where none existed. Help arrives from unexpected places. Solutions rise from situations that seemed barren. What changed was not the external circumstance alone, but the heart's willingness to ask in faith, rather than demand in pride. The power of a humble request also lies in its ability to soften the hearts of others. When a person lowers their defenses and speaks from a place of sincerity, it awakens compassion in those listening. Even the hardest or wealthiest or most distant individual can be touched by authenticity. That is why the millionaire in the story became more than an observer. He overheard humility, and humility stirred something inside him. He did not hear entitlement or anger. He heard a mother's quiet desperation wrapped in dignity. He heard someone who wasn't trying to manipulate or impress, but simply trying to provide one small comfort for a child. Humility has a way of disarming people. It melts cynicism. It challenges assumptions. It reminds the listener of their own humanity, their own blessings, and their own moments of need. In this way, humble requests act as bridges, connecting hearts that might otherwise remain strangers. Another reason humble requests unlock divine provision is because they acknowledge dependence on something greater. Asking with humility is not a sign of weakness but of spiritual clarity. It recognizes that God often works through people, timing, and circumstances that might not make sense at first glance. The mother's request for an expired cake seemed small, even insignificant, yet it carried immense symbolic power. She was not asking for luxury, she was asking for survival. She was not setting conditions, she was simply hoping for mercy. And that kind of vulnerability is often the birthplace of miracles. God does not require impressive speeches, elaborate strategies, or flawless performances. God responds to sincerity. A whispered prayer is often more powerful than a shouted demand. A trembling plea can carry more weight in heaven than a polished declaration. Humble requests also break the cycle of isolation. Pride often isolates, convincing individuals they must handle everything alone, that asking for help is a sign of failure. But humility reconnects people to community. It invites others into the story. It allows relationships to deepen. When someone asks for help with humility, they are not just receiving provision, they are allowing God to work through the compassion of others. This creates ripple effects, encouraging generosity, awakening empathy, and strengthening the bonds that hold people together. A single humble request can inspire acts of kindness that extend far beyond the original moment. Someone who witnesses compassion is more likely to become compassionate. Someone who experiences grace is more likely to extend grace. Humility becomes contagious, spreading quietly but powerfully. There is also a spiritual mystery in the way humble requests align with divine timing. When someone is humble, they are more attuned to subtle shifts, more open to hearing divine guidance, and more willing to step into opportunities that pride would have ignored. Humility slows the heart down enough to listen. It recognizes that blessings may come in unexpected forms, through unlikely people, or at moments that appear inconvenient. Because humility is patient and perceptive, it catches what pride would rush past. Many people miss their miracles simply because they expected them to appear in a certain shape. Humility, however, allows space for God to work creatively. It does not dictate the how, it simply believes that provision will come. Another dimension of humble requests is the transformation they create inside the requester. When someone asks with humility, they are practicing trust. They are admitting vulnerability but not surrendering hope. They are placing themselves in a posture that strengthens character. Over time, this shapes resilience, faith, and wisdom. The act of asking itself becomes part of the blessing because it deepens dependence on God and reduces the weight of self-imposed pressure. Many breakthroughs do not start with solutions. They start with honest confession. I need help. I cannot do this alone. I do not know the way forward. These are not admissions of defeat, they are invitations for divine strength to enter spaces where human strength ends. Humble requests also challenge the narratives of scarcity that often dominate the mind. When someone has experienced lack, it is easy to believe that resources are limited, that generosity is rare, or that help is unavailable. But humility pushes past those mental barriers. It acts on the belief that somewhere, somehow, provision exists, even if one must ask for something others consider worthless, like an expired cake. This belief is itself an expression of faith. It acknowledges that God can take what seems small, overlooked, or discarded and turn it into something meaningful. Humility does not focus on what is missing but on what is possible. And that shift in perspective can open the door to blessings before they even arrive. A humble request also creates alignment with God's heart, because God consistently elevates the meek and responds to those who approach with sincerity rather than arrogance. Throughout history and testimony, it is often the humble who experience the most profound interventions, not because they are more deserving, but because their hearts are more receptive. A proud person may receive the same opportunity yet miss the significance. A humble person recognizes it instantly. Their gratitude amplifies the blessing, turning even small provisions into foundations for deeper faith. Ultimately, humble requests carry transformative power because they invite heaven into human need in the simplest and purest way. They do not try to control the outcome. They do not pretend strength. They simply express truth. Truth about need, truth about limitations, truth about hope. And truth spoken in humility resonates deeply with the God who hears every whisper, every sigh, every quiet plea for help. God often turns our smallest pleas into life-changing blessings is a truth that unfolds gently yet powerfully across the landscape of human experience. Many of the greatest transformations begin not with bold declarations or grand gestures, but with the quiet, fragile hopes tucked inside the simplest requests. Sometimes these requests sound like whispered prayers offered at the edge of exhaustion. Sometimes they are brief moments of honesty that slip out when a person can no longer hold the weight of their circumstances alone. And sometimes they are questions asked with trembling courage, not because the requester believes they deserve an answer, but because they believe, however faintly, that an answer is still possible. These small pleas are rarely impressive to the outside world, Yet they carry extraordinary potential because they reveal a heart open to divine intervention. The power of a small plea lies in its authenticity. When a person speaks from the deepest part of their need, without embellishment or pride, the request rings with sincerity. It becomes a moment where the soul steps into alignment with heaven, acknowledging both its limitations and its longing for help. Small pleas strip away the pretense that often surrounds our interactions with others and even with God. They are raw, unfiltered expressions of dependence. This rawness is not weakness, it is clarity. It is an honest recognition that the human heart is not self-sufficient. It is an invitation for God to step into the very spaces where human strength ends. And because God delights in responding to sincere hearts, these small pleas become catalysts for blessings far greater than the requester could have imagined. A small plea is often born from desperation, but desperation itself is not the miracle. The miracle begins the moment the person still dares to ask. Asking requires hope, sometimes only a threat of it, but hope nonetheless. Even the smallest plea is a declaration that one has not given up on the possibility of change. This simple act of reaching out, whether through words, prayer, or quiet expectation, opens a spiritual pathway. It signals that the heart is willing to receive. And God, who sees far beyond the surface, uses this willingness as an opening to pour in provision, comfort, direction, or breakthrough. While the plea may be small, the blessing that follows often carries the weight of destiny. The wonder of divine response is that it rarely mirrors the size of the plea. The scale of God's blessing is not measured by the magnitude of the request, but by the magnitude of God's love. Someone may ask for strength to get through a single day and find themselves stepping into a season of renewed purpose. Another may ask for a small sign of encouragement and receive an opportunity that changes the trajectory of their future. The mother who asked for an expired cake was not asking for abundance, she was asking for survival. Yet the blessing that unfolded reached far beyond the request. This pattern echoes throughout life. The plea is small, but the blessing is expansive. God does not respond based on the eloquence of the request, but on the condition of the heart from which it was spoken. It is easy to underestimate the significance of small pleas because they arise quietly. They do not announce themselves. They often happen in moments of fatigue or fear when the requester feels least capable or least worthy. Yet these very moments create fertile ground for divine movement. When a person is stripped of everything except their honest need, they are most prepared to receive a blessing in its purest form. There is no arrogance to dilute it, no assumption to distort it, no self-reliance to compete with it. The blessing becomes unmistakably divine. It stands out not because it is loud, but because it arrives precisely where human ability ends. Another aspect of small pleas is that they often access blessings that were already prepared long before the plea was spoken. Divine provision frequently waits just outside the edge of human awareness, ready to be activated by the simple act of asking. The request does not create the blessing, it unlocks it. This is why even an unpolished, hesitant plea can lead to outcomes that feel surprisingly swift or perfectly timed. The blessing was not improvised at the last minute. It was already woven into the person's journey. The plea simply opened the door. And when that door opens, blessings pour into places that once felt empty or forgotten. What seemed like coincidence becomes confirmation. What felt like scarcity becomes sufficiency. What appeared hopeless becomes the foundation for a new beginning. Small pleas also carry the power to transform the person who makes them. Asking cultivates humility, courage, and spiritual awareness. It draws the requester closer to God, not because the act of asking is transactional, but because it fosters relationship. When someone brings their vulnerabilities before God, they are not merely expressing need, they are acknowledging trust. This trust reshapes the heart. It strengthens spiritual muscles that may have grown weak. It renews faith that may have become weary. It nurtures a deeper connection rooted not in routine, but in earnest dependence. And as this inner transformation takes place, the person becomes more attuned to recognizing blessings even before they unfold fully. They begin to notice divine fingerprints in moments they once overlooked. The beauty of small pleas is that they also invite God to work through people. Often the blessing arrives through ordinary hands, neighbors, strangers, mentors, leaders, or even individuals who are unaware they are playing a divine role. A simple plea has the power to awaken generosity and compassion in others. It can turn observers into participants, turning their resources into vessels of blessing. The millionaire in the story did not respond because he was obligated. He responded because the plea reached a part of his heart he had forgotten. This dynamic is common. God uses small pleas as a means of stirring the hearts of others into action. These interactions create connections, relationships, and ripple effects that extend far beyond the original request. When God turns a small plea into a life-changing blessing, the transformation is not merely external. It reshapes perspectives. It renews hope. It teaches the requester that they are seen, heard, and valued. It reinforces the truth that no plea is too insignificant for God's attention. This realization can alter the trajectory of someone's faith. It instills confidence that they can approach God without fear or formality, knowing that even their quietest cry matters. This shift in understanding becomes a lifelong anchor, helping them navigate future challenges with assurance that help is always within reach. Another remarkable aspect of small pleas is the way they reveal God's creativity. Divine blessings often come in forms the requester could never have predicted. The answer may arrive wrapped in a new relationship, a sudden opportunity, a moment of clarity, a changed heart, or a door that opens precisely when it needs to. The blessing may not look like what was requested, yet it fulfills the deeper need behind the plea. This creative response demonstrates that God is not limited by human expectations. Where a person sees only one possible solution, God sees countless. Where someone imagines a small relief, God imagines complete restoration. The small plea becomes the seed from which a blessing grows in unexpected shapes and sizes. Small pleas often highlight how intimately God cares for the details of a person's life. They show that divine attention is not reserved only for monumental crises or dramatic breakthroughs. God responds to the quiet concerns, the small fears, the daily needs, and the unspoken longings. This tender awareness reminds us that God's love is not distant or conditional, it is present and attentive. The blessing that flows from a small plea is often so personal and precise that it becomes unmistakable evidence of divine involvement. It affirms that no need is too minor and no request too simple. Finally, small pleas carry the potential to create testimonies that inspire others. When people hear that a simple, humble request led to a blessing that transforms someone's life, it awakens faith in their own hearts. It encourages them to bring their needs, however small, before God without hesitation. It reminds them that miracles often begin with ordinary words spoken in difficult moments. These testimonies become part of a larger tapestry of encouragement, proving again and again that God listens, responds, and provides in ways that reach far beyond the initial plea. And so, when all is said and done, let this truth settle deep within us: no cry is too quiet, no need too small, and no heart too hidden for God to reach. What begins as a whisper from a weary soul can become the very moment heaven steps in and rewrites a story. If we dare to trust, dare to ask, and dare to believe again, we will find that God is already working behind the scenes, turning our simplest pleas into blessings, far greater than anything we could have imagined.